That's right. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Bridging the Gap here on the Jersey First TV network. As always, I'm AJ Malillo,
I'm Stephen Rombolo.
and you can subscribe to us over on Jersey First TV at YouTube. Hit that little notification bell. Get all of your Bridging the Gap content, as well as your Nader narrative content and your Real Talk with Fernando content. You could check us out on jerseyfirst.org. You can sign up for our newsletter and sign the pledge as per usual. Stephen, it's another week in paradise. What's going on? You're getting ready for Memorial Day weekend over on the shore, so talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're what, like T minus a week and a half, I think, to the big unofficial start to summer, which is amazing. Can't wait. Season's gonna, I'm hoping, blast off and just keep cruising all the way through Labor Day. But I'll be honest with you, it's really exciting down here on the shore. I can speak to Seaside Heights, obviously, because that's where I am at. That's where home base is. But we have a lot of great new businesses that are popping up. Seaside Heights, Ortley Beach, Lavalette, even all the way down to Normandy. So I've been kind of keeping tabs, and I want to go. And you know me, one of my favorite things to do, one of my life mottos is, just support local business. Make friends with these people. They're your neighbors. They're your cousins, your aunts, your brothers, your sisters. Like the guy you see walking across the road with his dog is, that's your business owners, and they bring money, income, notoriety, things to your community, which just makes your community a better place to live. So to me, looking forward to Memorial Day, I'm looking forward to all these businesses getting started back up. I can tell you, we got a House of Fries. I know that was a big one on the boardwalk. They're opening a new location in Ortley Beach, which is really exciting. I'm actually getting ready tomorrow. I'm going to go check out this joint. It's called Pressed. It's this like super cool looking coffee waffle juice joint kind of thing right next to Barnacle Bills. So also in Ortley Beach. Grand opening. I'm very excited about that. There's some new Mexican spots on the boardwalk. I'm excited for business this year. That's what I'm looking forward to. And listen, we've been trending up. People have been coming down. It's been busy. Neighbors are out and about, and that's always my metric of, what the traffic is like coming down here and what a summer's going to look like. So, in terms of that, Seaside, and I'll say it, the Jersey Shore, we're ready to roll. We want you down here. We want to, have the summer that everybody's been waiting to have, and just going to make the most of it. Aside from that, things have been phenomenal.
Awesome. No, that you're right. Weather's been great too, so hopefully
Yeah.
that like stays up those trends. Um, and it sounds like Ortley Beach is popping. It's been a little bit, but it sounds like we're popping over there.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, like I said, we're coming up on, I think, is going to be a really big and important summer for us. We're like 11 years post Hurricane Sandy, which is huge for this community. And I think a lot of people forget that this part of New Jersey is still recovering from that because if you're not here, you don't see it. Right now, for the past week and a half, there's been dump trucks up and down my block doing another beach replenishment. The beach has been blocked off for the past 2 weeks because of this beach replenishment to make up for the losses that we suffered 11 years ago. Businesses that were not existing, businesses that got quite literally washed away. All of these things are coming back with a new energy, a new excitement. And there's a new hibachi restaurant in Ortley Beach too. So there's some really, that's what I'm saying. There's some really cool stuff coming. And as somebody who's lived here my entire life, like I said, I know summer is where we make the most, of our money, of our income, and where our community gets it comes to life for these next like 4 months. And it excites me to see so many new things, so many exciting things that people have poured their passion, their money, their love into that are going to make my community a better place to live. So, as a Ortley Beach resident, I'm hyped. As a foodie, I'm even more hyped. And as somebody who likes to see good people win, I'm excited about the future for recovery on the shore and just having an awesome summer. Like it's going to be great.
Yeah. No, I mean it's always the best time of year once Memorial Day weekend kicks in and summer starts. So Um,
Absolutely. But I gotta ask, you have a fancy new background over there, so why don't you let us know
oh
where you're
yeah,
at?
yeah. So I'm in the Hudson River Valley right now. I'm at my godmother's slash, well, my godmother, my cousin, s- uh, Hudson River Valley house, because my cousin goes to West Point up here. So we're up here for my godmother's birthday. She's turning the big 5-0, but doesn't look a day over 35. Lisa and Ernesto, Steven, so I don't have to tell you that. Um, and yeah, we're having a good time. We're gonna be in Manhattan tonight. We're gonna be
Nice.
going to get some dinner. And then I'll be back in the good old Delaware. So I'll be driving through New Jersey though, so that'll be fun.
That's perfect. You gonna put on the Bruce Springsteen?
Maybe not. I don't know. I think I'm gonna roll Billy Joel for a while I'm in New York, and then maybe throw on a little Frank Sinatra,
Mm,
maybe a little Whitney, you know,
okay.
maybe a little Frankie
Okay.
Valli and the Four Seasons. We'll go a little bit more old school, maybe.
So I gotta ask, what are the because I know first of all I want to say happy birthday, Lisa. Love you, miss you, can't wait to see you. AJ's right, not a day over 30. Um, I want to know. I'm curious because I feel like when this crew gets together that you've assembled, something cool always happens. So what are the plans for Manhattan?
Yeah, I mean, for Manhattan, we're just gonna go to a couple restaurants. My brother and his fiance are gonna meet us up in Manhattan because they had to work, and then some of Lisa's friends from Long Island are gonna meet us there. So nothing like super crazy. Me, Lisa, and Ernesto went on a nice hike yesterday up in the Storm King Mountain. Um, I think it might be hollow, but that's a different story for a different day. I was kind of like feeling the ground, and I was like, I don't know. I feel like this sounds hollow to me. Um, and so we're not too sure, but I mean, we're right by West Point, so the government could have something in there. You never know. Um,
Absolutely.
and so yeah, we hiked up top. We had some really awesome. There's a pretty awesome peak up there. Get to see the Hudson River and like from the two like multiple sides. I think we were looking. I think like the big peak is you're facing north, and then there's another peak that you're facing west.
Nice.
Um, so yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool up there. It was a fun hike. Had to do a little scramble as they call it. So you had to like climb a little bit, use your
Ooh,
hands.
nice. I feel like it's just worth mentioning, AJ, if you disappear, that mountain's totally not hollow.
Right. No, wink, wink. I didn't fall.
Yeah.
The joke was that we'll fall into the Revolutionary War. It'll like
Oh,
transport us
nice.
back in time.
That is so cool. Well,
But
I'm
yeah, it was
glad
a lot
things
of
are
fun.
going well up there.
Yeah, it was a good time for sure.
I feel like there's a recurring trend on this podcast. You and I are like always in different places,
Yeah, I think that that makes it half the fun, right? We're young
right?
guys. We're not settled. We're nomadic. We're
No,
transient.
I like that.
It's, we're the Gen Z podcast, right? So it's like what's I think we'll get into some, our topic for today, but might be a little interesting, quick chat. I think that something that we're going to see about our generation, especially having our experience that we've had with COVID, is that I don't think that we're going to be a very stable generation in
No,
a location wise. I think that our generation's really going to embrace travel and like being different places for and not staying anywhere for one long period of time. And that's going to have its positives and its negatives, but I could see us being quite the transient generation.
I would agree with that, and I think, at least personally, that I see that being very true for me. And I think one of the things that fosters that is this. We are the generation of the internet, social media, and I remember like when I was young, some of the coolest videos that you would watch are like people that have been friends on, I don't know, PlayStation, right? Where they met in a lobby and they just played together for years and years and years. And one of them lives in Oregon and the other's in Florida, and then all of a sudden, these two people who have no real reason to know each other find an excuse to go somewhere new, do something together and meet. And I think our generation thrives in that environment and treating the world like understanding the world as a big place, but making it feel as small as we can by trying to see as much of it as we can. Um, so I would agree with you, and I also think competitively, jobs force that on some people. I know our good friend Nick was telling me the other day. in tech, he's like, I'm looking to change jobs every 3 to 5 years, whether it means I'm moving from New Jersey to Austin to Silicon Valley to here to there. He's like, I'm going to chase the jobs and the career development and certain lines of work that requires location change to be in the hub of these places, because a lot of industry is sort of focused regionally in certain places. So I think there's a lot of reasons that contribute to it, but I agree with you. It'll be interesting to see what that sort of, I'm not going to call it instability, but in a way it is instability, makes a Gen Z family look like in the next, 15 to 30 years. A young Gen Z family, what are they looking like? So I think it'll
Yeah.
be really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And I also, I mean, the only thing that I worry about, and I think this is something that we can, again, like real briefly talk about, but it goes back to what you were talking about with these new businesses opening up in Ortley Beach. It's like if there is a lot of movement, then you're going to lose something about that like small town, small business feel. And so like that's something I worry about. For example, my parents live in a pretty heavy military town, so there's a lot of movement all the time. Nobody's really settled in where my parents live. So it's almost like there's not really that small family run business. Everything's a chain because there can be a lot of turnover when you're working with chains. There doesn't like you don't have to have that steady everybody knows everybody type of feel. So I think
Yeah.
it hurts a small business, a small restaurant, a small mom and pop shop type of thing. It hurts small town America, which is, I have a soft spot because that's where we're from.
Yeah.
Really. And we're going to talk about Tom's River and the mayoral election, which is one of the biggest towns in New Jersey. But people don't really leave Tom's River. Like it has a small town feel. So I think that that's like one negative and one possible drawback. While there's a lot of positives towards that transient generation.
Yeah. And I'll add on to that. I'm very much a perspective kind of guy. I'll say for me personally, one of my most favorite things about traveling and going to new places is finding those small businesses. Like, why am I going to get on a plane, fly to Miami to go and sit down and eat dinner at a TGI Fridays?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and I think as long as that spirit is alive, it, you can find new ways to support small America. And I think it almost offers this perspective for a small business to be like, yeah, you know what? I am just a coffee shop on the island, in Lavalette. But through social media, through all these, great stories and good customer service and product and standing out, all of a sudden, this little coffee shop in Lavalette, while that's where it is, they have fans all over the world. And next time somebody's in New Jersey, if it is a extra half an hour ride, it's be like, you know what? I've been following this coffee shop for a year and a half, and I really want to see what they're all about. And I think that those stories are common as well. So it's almost like you can remain small town, but have a global audience. And I, like you said, there's a lot of like give and take and positive and negative to it, but it's really interesting to see in real time. And then as we move forward, as Gen Z starts to become business owners, and what does small town Gen Z look like? Your neighborhood coffee shop that has 100,000 followers isn't really small town, but it's going to be so interesting. So you got me all excited and jacked up now about something that I didn't think we were going to talk about, but it's very, very exciting. I can't wait. I can't wait to see what this wonderful life has in store for us.
I'm sure nothing but good things ultimately, right? I mean, there's going to be good and bad, but I'm an optimist, so I'm going to say that it's going to be mostly the positive. But
Absolutely.
let's talk a little bit about our small town where we're from, which is Tom's River, and we got a big mayoral primary coming up June
Yes,
6th.
we do.
So just in like 2 weeks. And it's for the mayor's spot along with town council. So you got your incumbent Mo Hill, who's the current Republican mayor of Tom's River, and he's running with Councilman Kevin. Uh, Gio, this last name's a tough one. It's Geo Jahigan or something like that. It's a
I'm
tough
pretty
last name.
sure. I'm pretty sure it's G Hogan.
Jehogan. I don't know.
I
It's that's
that's that would be my guess.
Jehogan. Yeah, that's a tough last name.
Georgian. G-
Georgian, maybe.
I
Okay.
don't know.
Josh Josh Kopp. Um, we have Matt Latano, and they've all been endorsed by the Toms River Republicans, who are the official GOP like party group of Ocean County. And then there's the Save Toms River team. That's their that's Save Toms River team. That's mayoral candidate Daniel Roderick, who's councilman, and he ran in the last mayoral election as well. And he's running with Tom Nivison, who is the CEO of Silverton Farms, Lynn O'Toole, who is the president of the adults community of Holiday City, and Craig Coleman, who was the former vice principal or vice president of the Ocean County Vocational and Tech School. Um, and then there's a third crew running, and that would be mayoral candidate Jerry Ambrosio, who is the former president of the Toms River Regular Republicans Club, which was the former official Republican club of Toms River, but no longer. Um, then there's Gary Mundy, who is the former assistant township attorney. There's Norvella Pug Lightbody, who is the widow of former Mayor Lightbody and the secretary of the Toms River Parking Authority Board, and Sergio Fossa, who is the staff pastor at Grace Bible Church. So they're all running for town council. And then finally, there's Robert Bianchini. He is an engineer and director of capital projects and public facilities for Asbury Park Public Works, and he is running without any council members backing, as running mates. And then there's the Democrats, who John Fury is running for mayor unopposed, so he will be there for the general election unless some wild chicanery happens with some write-ins or something like that. And then he's running with Michelle Williams, Kajal Lal, and Retta Jackson. And then there's Paul Williams, who is running by himself for town council as a Democrat. So that's shaping up to be your primary slate. And obviously, the big thing is over on the Republican side of the aisle. It's been pretty contentious, especially between, I'd say, the three front-running candidates, which would be incumbent Mo Hill, Daniel Roderick, and Jerry Ambrosio. And it seems like when it comes to Tom's River, it's a pretty red area. So really the election is decided in this Republican primary, and it seems like the big issue is going to be is things with zoning and overdevelopment, quote unquote issues, and some other things like funding of a new multifamily unit that Mayor Hill has worked to accomplish. It's a 10-story building, and it's multifamily units over on Water Street in Toms River, and yeah, and it just seems like another contentious election. There's been fights over things like sloganeering. There's been fights over things like there's been corruption charges levied at the current mayor. Just kind of bare knuckles brawling of politics in this Toms River election. And there's been a split of the Republican Party in Toms River, which has had a stranglehold over politics for a long time. So, Steve, what are your thoughts on what's going on?
So I want to do a complete 100% look at the situation right here. And I want to start by saying uh, New Jersey, obviously, Jersey first, great state. Um, we suck for having closed primaries. I think that closed primaries are so stupid. And if you don't know what a closed primary is, I think it's worth discussing briefly. Closed primary basically means you have to declare a party affiliation in order to vote in that party's primary. So you have to be registered and declared on paper through the county clerk as a Democrat to vote for, John Fury as the party's candidate for the mayoral election and the general election. You have to be registered as a Republican to vote for who you want the Republicans to nominate to go up against Fury. I think it's stupid. I think that anybody should be able to vote And honestly, I think you should be able to pick on both sides. I think I should be able to vote for which Democrat I want to run, and I should be able to vote for which Republican I want to run, because the purpose of an election to me is to get the guy that's best fit for the job in office. And what is the thing that we hear every year, every election cycle? Choosing between the lesser of two evils, or it all smells the same. Like, if we had the opportunity to say, hey, you know what? I like this guy on the right. His ideas, he's great. I like this. I don't like that. I'd like to see him go up against, this woman, and she has these, really progressive views that I kind of like. I don't really like. And I'd like to see these two people duke it out because I could go either way. That to me sounds like a system that would, you know, allow the voters a little more sway and decision making in who ends up on that ballot come November when it counts.
Well,
That being said, I just think it's worth noting, even if you're not declared, right? The last day that you could have declared to request a ballot, a mail-in ballot, was the 16th of May, so we just missed it. If you're not registered in the state of New Jersey, you can go to the polls on election day, which is June 6th, and you can register for a party there and then vote same day. So I will say, if you missed out, if you didn't know the deadlines, if you didn't know that we had closed primaries and you're in Tom's River or any of these other towns or counties that might be hosting elections this cycle, because this goes true for all of New Jersey, you could show up on election day, declare a party affiliation, and then be able to vote that same day. So there is some sort of redeeming quality here, but I think overall, closed primaries are so stupid.
I want to push back just slightly, and I don't necessarily disagree with you, but like the rationale for the closed primary is so that something like this, where the Democrats running unopposed, so they don't really need major Democrat turnout for the Democratic primary, you prevent people running that are Democrats to vote in the Republican primary to vote for, say, the least electable Republican, the Republican that like isn't going to win the primary because they want the least electable person to go out and run against the Democrat, right? So like you don't want that to happen where there's some sort of um, like coordinated attack from one party to another. It's like it would be the same. Say the Republican is running unopposed, and they pick, they go out there and they elect on the Democratic side of the aisle, like the most far left person that is running, which will sort of alienate a certain percentage of the Democratic Party from voting for that person as well. Like you want your party to pick the person representing your party. I think that it's one thing to have an open primary for independents. Like an independent can vote for either primary, whichever one they want, and they don't have to necessarily change their party affiliation. I think that's fair. But I don't think necessarily that if you are a registered Democrat, you shouldn't vote in the Republican primary and vice versa.
But don't you think that if that was the case, if all the Tom's River Democrats are like, all right, we're gonna go and we're gonna vote for Roderick because we don't think he can win, don't you think that would make the Republicans say, hey, you know what? We got to really put our foot on the gas, and we got to make sure that even if they do that, we need to be able to overcome that, because that's what we're facing in the general election anyway.
I'm
Put a
not
little more
sure.
gusto, put a little more passion behind these primaries. It seems so cozy.
I'm not
It
sure
seems like a
because a certain percentage of the Republican base would vote for Roderick anyway. And so then now you're going to have Democrats who are working in a different with different motives in mind that are going to be shifting the balance of this election, which isn't necessarily I don't think that that necessarily plays well. I think that if anything, it makes it a more divisive, and you're going to end up with more of this. I feel like I'm picking between somebody I don't even really want. Again, I think it's different if you're a registered independent. Um, I'm perfectly fine with like an open primary for independents and a closed primary if you're choosing a party affiliation.
I don't know. I'm gonna have to let this fizzle so I can talk about the candidates.
Sure.
But closed primaries are stupid in my opinion. um, so I'll say this much: it's going to be really fun to watch what happens with the Republicans. In terms of Mo, that's what his nickname is, Maurice Mo Hill. Um, he's been the mayor for quite some time since our last mayor, Kelleher, passed. I believe it was like he got out of office, Mo came in, Kelleher passed, and Kelleher had this legacy. He was the mayor of Toms River for I think functionally my whole life, almost 2 decades. Um, so I think this is an interesting time for Toms River because we just kind of got out of this legacy, and the Republicans, like you said, there is this fissure, there is this separation on what certain sects of the Republicans in Toms River see as desirable goals for the community. So being that there's only one Democrat on the ballot, and listen, I understand the dynamic of Toms River where we are, and that this Democrat, it probably doesn't stand a chance against either whomever on the Republican Party um, gets the nomination. And truthfully, the last time that I was surprised by this was when we had, I want to say it was maybe the 2020 election, where Thomas MacArthur, our representative, who again was a legacy kind of representative, had represented Toms River in Congress for, well, the third district of New Jersey,
It'll be
um,
2018.
2018. Man, it was so long ago. It feels like yesterday.
Mm.
Um, he had represented the third district for such a long time, and Republicans, this was a Republican, like, everybody was kind of like, yep, Republicans are taking it. And then out of nowhere, Andy Kim comes in, uh, sweeps it away from him, and has been doing pretty well ever since. I don't suspect that that's going to happen in Tom's River for our candidates for mayor at all. And I think that this is going to come down to, if Mohel wins the nomination, he's going to be an incumbent. He doesn't really do much in the way of good or bad. Day to day life in Tom's River, you don't hear much about the mayor. Um, so it seems like a shoe in. However, I think Roderick is an interesting candidate. I think that his platform is controversial, for good reason. And it'd be interesting to see. I know these guys are having a debate before the um, the election on June 6th. Then Roderick already had said that he wasn't going, and Mo Hill is also not going to be attending. So we're not really going to get the chance in the public forum to see these guys duke it out and go head to head about these issues that they disagree on, which I know we had touched on briefly before. I deal a lot with zoning and housing issues in Toms River. So right now, I think it's a wait and see kind of game. And hopefully, after the primaries, the Democrats kick it up and they get some money behind this John Fury guy. They start putting out a legitimate platform and a way to, you know, dismantle and slowly swing people over on the left. Because me personally, nobody on the right's appealing in this election. And I've not been afraid to be open about people on the right that I am a fan of, but none of these guys do it for me here in Tom's River. So
Yeah, I mean, like I think that the Towns River election is an interesting one during the primary because you do have the two front runners are Roderick and Mo Hill, and it seems like they have fairly large differences when it comes to this development plan, and that's where it is, and I think that there's a fear among a sect of the right for increase in development in Tom's River, but I think that's something that is lacking is like you're losing people, and that's why you're losing funding from the state through schools, and you're losing funding in other things. So like there's these complaints going on about how Tom's River schools are like losing all of this money, but that's just because like their populations are going down. So then
yep,
and then you're mad about overdevelopment and trying to increase the population of your town. So I think it's like there's a catch 22 there, I'm sure, because we were just talking about this small town feel, and there's a little bit of a natural inkling to like push back against people moving in, and people that like you don't know, and from other communities. But at the same time, your town has to grow or die.
yep.
So it's like start having more babies or start letting more people move in. You know what I mean? Like it's like you got one or two options. So we'll see how it all turns out. There is a debate. It seems like it's just going to be Mr. Bianchini and Miss Ambrosio for now, and we'll see if something changes. But um, but yeah, June 6th, get out to vote. That's what they say, right?
Yeah, get out. So it'll be interesting. I think now's a good time to bounce and talk about our second story that we have for today, which I feel like you and I just we've been on a roll lately talking about education. Um, so you want to start away with
Yeah, yeah. So basically, this is coming from Councilwoman or Assemblywoman Marilyn Piperino, who's an Assemblywoman from the 11th Legislative District, and she's talking about how recently Governor Murphy had introduced his proposed budget for the next fiscal year, and in that proposed budget, there were cuts to over 200 school districts totaling in $55 million, despite there being a $10 billion budget surplus. And she talks about how we can't have school cuts because school funding cuts because like they're needed more than ever. Students are facing mental health issues. There's been a full scale public health crisis, and students' safety and mental health needs to be taken into account. The state needs to um, sort of afford all of these kids, regardless of their zip code, a high quality education. And Peperino has been on this, or Peperino has been on this kick for a while, and she proposed legislation last year talking about how she wanted to set up a task force to sort of maybe re-examine our funding system in for schooling, and it didn't even make it out of committee. It was shot down. um, she talks about in the article how there was this piece of legislation from the Senate that was passed that is sort of like a shot in the arm for a little bit more funding, but it's only like a two-thirds funding of what is would be needed and what they were supposed to have before these budget cuts, these early school funding cuts, and it's a one-time thing. It's not like continual throughout the fiscal year. And so she talks about how her plan would be to change the tax structure of how these schools get their funding, because currently most of the funding comes from property taxes with some state um, financing to back it. And she talks about how these property taxes disproportionately affect middle and low income families, which makes sense because your house, when you're a middle low income family, like your house is your biggest expense and it's your biggest asset. So that's where most of your taxes are going to be coming from. You're not going to be it's not going to be income tax if your income isn't exceptionally high, since we live in a progressive income tax system. So she said we should be focused more on getting this money from the income tax as opposed to the property tax, which will give tax cuts to more middle and low income families, and it'll change that tax burden more onto the higher income families throughout the state. But what's most interesting to me about the whole story is that this is a Republican assemblywoman that's fighting for increased funding for schools and increase coming from the disproportionate wealth distribute the disproportionate tax structure, which hurts middle and low income families, and going towards an income tax structure which will affect more of the high income earners in New Jersey. And I think that it's kind of this role reversal that we're seeing in a broader sense, especially when it comes to education, from the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. It seems like nationally speaking, Republicans have been focused pretty heavily on um, education reform and allowing for more choice among families to choose where their uh, children are getting educated, how they're getting educated. And I feel like that was a bugaboo of the left, 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago even. And now it's the right that has taken up this mantle and gone full swing. And I think that has to do with things like teachers unions and whatnot. And that's a further story for another day. But yeah, so really this change in the incentive structure and the tax structure to get more fundings to these schools. And I think that she's right. Like I don't think that we're in a place that it makes sense to be cutting funding. um, this drastically when we have some of the best public schools in the country. Like, this
It's
is
true.
something that we should be proud of, and we should be continue to fund. I'm not sure what else the state is should be there for other than public education. Like, that's like issue numero uno, in my opinion, for any state.
Yeah. So I'll say this. I think it's interesting, and this is something that we had talked about a few weeks ago. So she writes this article, and she starts by mentioning, and I'll just read the first few sentences here from this article. It says, quote, recently, Governor Murphy introduced his proposed budget for the 2023-2024 fiscal year. And his proposed budget is the continued relentless pursuit of cuts to over 200 districts this year, totaling $55 million, despite a $10 billion surplus. So, just off the rip on that alone, I think that there needs to be, again, a re-emphasis on the way that Governor Murphy is moving about dealing with finances of the state. We were talking a few weeks ago about the mayoral candidate in West New York, and Murphy was out there saying, "This is my money. I'm going to spend it how I want," and you can tell everybody that. And now all of a sudden, it's his money, and he's spending it cutting funding from 200 school districts, and we have Republicans on the floor with, like you said, very well thought out proposed bills that are seeking to make sure students get an adequate education. And one thing I like that she mentioned in here, she says that she says, we're committed to ensuring that all students have an equal opportunity to receive a high quality education, regardless of their zip code. It, if that is your objective, if that is the heartbeat of your legislation, I want to ask the Democrats why we couldn't even have a conversation on the floor about that, why we couldn't even bring it up for a vote, because that to me seems like quite possibly one of the most agreeable statements that anybody could make on any issue, is making sure that our kids are receiving the highest quality of education that they can, regardless of their zip code. Um, so shame on the Democrats tremendously. I'm trying to wrap my head around, and I've been trying to wrap my head around, like you said, why this bill in particular and the education issue at large has sort of flipped the table. Because to me, as many intricacies as there are, as many ins and outs, and like you said, there's the function of unions and lobbying and activism and all these other things. At the end of the day, education is about one thing, and it's about our kids, and it's about putting them in the best position to succeed, become productive members of society, functional adults, and afford them opportunities to go out into the real world. How we go about getting there, we can discuss that. But something like this bill and something like funding schools seems like I said before, one of the most agreeable pathways to achieving that common goal, or what should be a common goal. I don't want to speak for either side here. So I'm a little bit disappointed in the Democrats. And I agree with you. It was just as shocking for me to read this. And like you had mentioned, she talks about this emphasis on mental health and student services and all these things that you would traditionally assume to hear come out of a Democratic bill. And it's not. So I'm feeling very let down by the Democrats. And I want to say hats off over here. And I hope that this bill lives on and gets its day, because she's right. This funding is $100 million patch on a much larger issue, and an issue that's going to continue to proliferate unless we are productive about stopping course, turning it around, and fixing the issue. I don't know if a new governor is going to change that. I don't know what is going to change that. But this is something that we should keep an eye on. This is something that, it doesn't seem like she will, but shouldn't be left for dead, because you're talking about the future of our children and their education in this state.
Yeah, I don't know, Stephen. I just you got to call it like you see it. Like, to me, it just doesn't seem, if we're being completely honest, that like the Democrats are in this for for the kids across the country. Like, it just doesn't feel like they're in it for getting kids the right education, the most proper education that they have. It seems like the Democratic Party has made its bed with the unions and has decided to do whatever is best for them. So they'll fight and fight and fight for increase in teacher pay, which sure it's important. Like don't get me wrong, but then they will kowtow and like give up on actual funding of things that will directly help students, and that just seems like counterintuitive and wrong to me. And it's like, should teachers make good salaries? Absolutely. Some of the most important, most influential people in my life were teachers that I had, and I think that they deserve the world because I think that they were wonderful. But at the same time, it's like, not but that's the wrong word, but like, but at the same time, at saying that, like, we're screwing the kids in this situation over 99% of the time, and it's like, who are we doing it for? Who are we doing it for? Like,
I don't have a good answer for you.
I thought we were doing it for them. Like, I genuinely, and maybe I'm wrong.
I,
As
I couldn't
adults,
have said it better.
as the voting population, as adults, there's a responsibility to look out for those most vulnerable, and those most vulnerable are children. Like that is kind of the whole part of why we should be focused on a good education system to begin with. Like less so for having an educated population, yes, important. Having a good working population that can do certain tasks and things, yeah, important. But like over all of that is just being able to have a place that children can go and learn and feel safe and feel comfortable and um be able to have a good environment to grow up in. Like that is vital. And you're not going to achieve any of your other outcomes in this thing if you don't have that. And so I just think that somewhere along the way, people got lost in what education should be about and what school should be about, and they got focused on like these political goals of adults and like using children as their I don't even know what like carriages to like get these political end goals that you want. And it's like that's not what this is about. It's never should have been what this is about. This should be about kids going there, learning, you know, reading, writing, and arithmetic, and some history, and learning like how to have meaningful connections with people around you, and like being able to be functioning in in society from like a communicative standpoint, from a social cohesion standpoint, and that will ultimately make them better citizens and our country a better place throughout. Like it just seems like we've lost our way.
Yeah, and I want to double down on that. And I want to say a lot of the times when schools, start receiving less money, the things that go are the extracurriculars, which the curriculum is important, but you're talking about things that might give these kids an opportunity to stay in this environment a little bit later. Things that might help parents a little bit. You get your kid involved in sports in a club, and it teaches you things that are relevant outside of the classroom. And you would hate to see a sports program go. You would hate to see the history club not be able to take a trip to the museum of natural history in New York City, right? And afford your kids those opportunities to be expansive, to have social interaction, to learn qualities surrounding hard work, what it looks like to be a good teammate, what leadership looks like, take direction outside of the classroom in different ways. And the reality is, when schools lose money, those are the first things to go.
Yeah.
And they're just as important as a curriculum. So, on that front as well, it is a shame and it is a failure, because one way or another, kids are getting less than what they deserve, less than what they, I would argue, need to have access to in order to become the best, most well rounded version of themselves as individuals before they're productive members of society or a workforce. We're robbing them of the opportunity to nurture themselves and their interests.
Yeah, well, To your point, Stephen, I'd say, and I was thinking about this the other day, like the most important things that I do in my everyday life and use in my everyday life isn't things that I necessarily learned in the classroom. It's things that I learned through my extracurricular activities that I did, whether that was sports or drama or music or art, like whatever I was doing, like the things that make me a well-rounded person and like have the ability to interact with literally anybody from anywhere or
Yep.
to quell nerves and anxieties that like come with life, like all of those things I didn't learn in a classroom. I learned in school though. I learned it through the extracurricular activities that exactly that you said that are the first things to go. The art department that goes, the music department that goes, the sports teams that goes, right? That's that's where you learn all of the biggest life skills is in those things. It's like I don't know. I find it ridiculous. I'm and if we're already running a $10 billion surplus, like I don't know about you, Stephen. I'm cool with it being a $9 billion surplus if our schools don't get cut in the process. Like it's just like it's not the end of the world.
It's
And
silly.
yeah, um, I'm good.
It's silly. It's silly, and it's a failure. On behalf of our children, and something that, quite frankly, hearing this, you should be ashamed of. Anybody who's participatory in the system and is, just kind of okay with this happening, it's a failure, and we need to do better for the kids, because doing better for the kids is doing better for our future. So give them the money. Make sure that these kids get their education. Make sure that these kids have access to these programs, and be better. Point
Yeah, and I
blank,
agree.
be better.
At, as we wrap up, I'll quote a Jersey legend. I believe the children are the future. Um, we have to let them lead the way. So that would be the great Whitney Houston. So, look, Steve, we're gonna have to wrap up here. We're running out of time. You got any last words for the people?
Uh, Whitney's last words. There's no better way to end.
All right, everybody. I'm AJ Malillo,
I'm Stephen Rombolo.
and this has been another episode of Bridging the Gap. We hope to see you next week here on Jersey First TV. Please subscribe, hit that notification bell, and check out jerseyfirst.org. Have a good week, everyone.